plain vanilla balance of payment crisis. When you have a balance of payments crisis, the usual recipe is devalue exchange rate, reduce M, raise T, reduce the margin deficit. These are the 3 steps. India did the 3, plus changed labor market regulations, which allowed firms to hire and fire, and greatly relaxed restrictions on foreign direct investment. India always had very stringent laws against foreign direct investment. Why? India was ruled by a multinational corporation for 200 years, the East India Company. So their hatred for foreign business is very clear. But they opened it up. Why did they open it up? Because they saw the Chinese Navy outside Chittagong Harbor in Bangladesh. They saw the Chinese Navy in the Burmese ports. And they say, what is the Chinese Navy doing in the Indian Ocean? To be poor was to be insecure. And we cannot afford to be insecure. That's why Naram Simha Rao and Lakman Mohan Singh, who did this big across the board deregulation. But the whole thing is, and China really was not, if you look at China's FDR, it goes like this. 1992, it goes like this. So the FDR in China has been going like this, then it jumps up. Why? Because after the June 4th in 1989, China was actually rolled back. People wanted China to ever go back, no way. But when the implosion of the Soviet Union came, they know there was no third way. So Deng Xiaoping went on his lunch, his tour. Basically, he said, welcome capitalism. And everyone read the signal, and FDR jumped. So, all of them integrated into the global economy, 1990-92 period. So if you go fast forward 2,000 years later, there's this, the number of people in the International Division of Labor is from here to here. Take the Heckscher-Ohlin model. In the Heckscher-Ohlin model, double the labor force. What's the prediction of Heckscher-Ohlin? Double the labor force. One conclusion. Rates of profit goes up, wages go down. Take any model, double the labor force, wages will go down. So how does it go down in a world that is undergoing globalization? Rich countries like the US, poorer countries like Soviet Union and China and India. So high cost, low cost. Huge flow of imports, manufactured imports from low income, low cost country to high income country, kill their industries. Look at Detroit, depopulation. Chicago, depopulation. Kill the industry large scale, create unemployment, and unemployment push this down, and because of the growth, this goes up. That's how convergence will happen, right? Think of the Heckscher-Ohlin model. Double the labor force, one country. You will find this happen clearly. That's what we all believe, right? But that turns out to be wrong. That's it. And why will be wrong? Because if you look at the actual numbers for the US, the unemployment rate is this. The unemployment rate actually since 1990 to 92 been falling. The model that we all been brought up to believe, unemployment rate should be going up and wages falling in the US. But instead, unemployment rate is falling in the US and wages been going up. Have we been teaching crap to our students? No, I'm serious. Any Heckscher-Ohlin model would unambiguously say that wages should go down and unemployment rate should go up. But instead, we are confronted with this. What is the reason? This is where Alan Greenspan comes in. There's this great flood of goods coming into the developed countries, tending to push prices down in the US. Alan Greenspan expanded money supply. All these poor guys who are fired from their industrial manufacturing jobs, low-skilled labor, what happens to them? They lost their jobs to China. So what happened to them? Unemployment continues to go down because they all went into low-skilled jobs in construction sector. That's what easy monetary policy did. It created asset bubble, especially housing. So it absorbed a huge quantity of low-skilled labor into building houses. And at the same time, as the stock market gets rich, the demand for services goes up. People dine out more often. Instead of cooking, we dine out more often. The restaurant waiter business expands. People are willing to pay for gardeners, whereas they do not. So all kinds of services expands because of the bubble economy. So unemployment rate didn't go up. So all these industries are being killed, and yet no one is too upset. They're all happily building houses or serving filet mignon to the richer consumers. But that's not sustainable because the supply of houses cannot greatly exceed the growth rate of population for sustained periods of time. And when there's a cyclical downturn, the whole thing goes kaput. So here, these folks who were working as in the construction industry are now unemployed. What jobs can they go to? Especially after WTO, China joined WTO. Negotiations finished about 2000. That's right, 2001, WTO. When we joined WTO, American factories dismantle the capital equipment, ship them across the Pacific, and produce from China to service the United States. You would think that all these workers would be in terrible shape, but no, they found new jobs thanks to the easy monetary policy. So the unemployment that should have appeared was postponed. And now the bubble is over, these guys are exposed. They cannot find jobs. So how convincing is that? So my thesis is the US is not just hit by globalization, and basically the internet revolution and all of that has caused the economy to continue to grow, but they want high skilled labor. And the result is there is a mismatch of skills between what's supply and what's demand. And there's this structural unemployment, and quantitative easing cannot address this mismatch in skill. Because quantitative easing cannot match this mismatch in skill, you have the jobless recovery. Basically, if you look at all the management consulting reports in the US, they all talk about we've got to deal with this labor shortage at the high skill level. We've got to have easier visas for Aussies to go over and work there. IT people. And all kinds of, they expect the shortage to grow even worse. But they're not talking about low skill labor. They're talking about high skill labor. And in intermediate macro, in the better textbook, what would they have introduced? When you say there's a mismatch of skill, that new jobs are created and people cannot take it, what is that in intermediate macro? A shift in the beverage curve. What's the beverage curve? The beverage curve is this relationship between the vacancy of an economy and the unemployment rate. At a certain unemployment rate, the lower the unemployment rate, the higher the vacancy rate, because there are not enough people to fill those jobs, right? So a negative relationship is normal. And in fact, if you look at history, the US has been moving along here for the last 30 years, along that line. But now, the bus came, we have moved along a different line, because we cannot absorb the low skill labor that is out there. And what is the way, so what is the US adjustment to it? The optimal adjustment from the economist's point of view? We would say, we train those poor people, but then that is a clean talk as well. train me and ask me to come to your programs. I'm serious. It's hard to retrain people. And since you cannot retrain people, to keep them employed, you have to do things like you give them unemployment insurance, you give them subsidized wages. But the people you can really retrain are their children. So that they don't take the jobs of their parents, and those jobs are gone anyway, you have to train them. But what's the response to the global crisis in the United States? The universities have greatly reduced the enrollment of American students and welcomed the enrollment of foreign students. Everybody is subsidized because the tuition cannot meet the average total cost. But the subsidy received by a domestic student is higher than the subsidy received by a foreign student. So the US has adjusted to it with fiscal orthodoxy, which basically killed the local people from avoiding the fate of their parents. That's what's wrong with the US. So what does that mean for Australia? What it means for Australia is the US is going to be a troubled country for some time to come. Australian economic prosperity would depend more on East Asia than before. So because Australian prosperity would depend more on East Asia than before, that is until the Americans do the right thing, and we know the Americans always do the right thing after they've tried everything else, right? The right thing to do would be educational programs, training, and some kind of welfare programs. That means that if they continue to do what they do, they're not going to fix themselves. And so whom the Americans blame? When you look at it, this is the present situation in the US. Emphasis on macro stimulus. The lazy poor. It's not that their jobs have gone away, they're just very lazy. And then their children, well, since they're not as smart as the foreign applicants, since they don't pay as much as the foreign applicants, too bad for them. They can go stay in community college. Of course, I do not want to underplay this. There's great mistrust of the government in the US because of things that are going well. You could see people even vote against Obamacare. I mean, social safety net. You can agree on the social safety net when you argue about how to finance it, efficiency, sustainability. But to even argue against that, the United States faith in the government's ability to fix things can be seen that most of the US population don't believe there has been climate change. And 2/3 of Congress believe that in creationism. You know what creationism is? In us, Adam and Eve, that's what the creation of the origin of species. But basically, the sense of vulnerability is very strong. The Occupy Wall Street movement, for example, you could see the financial plutocracy in the US has been truly in charge. Look at all the secretaries of the Treasury in the US since the Nixon years. They used to be industrialists. Now they're all Goldman Sachs alumni. And where does Obama go to raise money? Clinton's contribution to the revival of the Democratic Party is to bring Wall Street into the Democratic Party. Wall Street now contributes to both sides. Wall Street in the past used to contribute only to the Republicans. So there's a culture war in the US, and how do we, there's insecurity about the outside world, who are our friends and who are our enemies. Australia, of course, is always a true friend, but then we are not sure. So this insecurity, I think, lays the groundwork for what time should I go? 5 more minutes and we stop, because I think we should let people go for lunch. Effects. Basically, what are their complaints against the rest of the world? In Beijing right now, Yeah, it just ended. Sorry, just ended. The U.S. Secretary of the Treasury and the U.S. Secretary of State, John Kerry, were just in Beijing. They had a strategic and economic dialogue, which happens once a year. And in the opening speech, Jack Lew, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, said, China must appreciate, as if on automatic pilot. The Chinese, after all. But the strange thing is, you see the name, Bergston, Lani, Michael Musa, they belong to an outfit called Peterson Institute of Economics. They are the ones who say that the renminbi is 40% overvalued 10 years ago. Today, they say, after all these years of appreciation, it's just about right. 2 or 3 percentage points. No big deal. This is one of the worst critics of China overvaluation talking. Now they say it's no longer a problem. Why does the US still say it's a problem? Basically, it's almost out of heaven. We say it was a problem in the past, we say it's a problem now. So, and when you think about it, it's part of it is the other big US complaint is intellectual privacy. In other words, we are going to have high-paying jobs. We are stealing our high-paying jobs in the future. The industries that were set up in the US that will produce jobs, you taking them away. This is a certainly very big issue. And I think that this would be what, because who are the strongest China lobbyists in US Congress? The strongest lobbyists for China are US industries. The US Chamber of Commerce, because they've located a lot of factories there, and they're producing over there and selling their back. But now they realize that they have relocated a lot of them there, and now they're going to relocate even more, but the ones that are going to relocate have higher intellectual, more knowledge driven than the ones that have been sent over. And they realize the Chinese are very good in sucking up all that knowledge, just like part of the students. So, the intellectual privacy is going to be different. Okay, let me quickly say something very quick. All this emphasis on the renminbi is very wrong-headed, because the Chinese, the Americans have beaten down the Japanese before in the past, right? But the Japanese appreciate the yen by this. But if you look at overall US and Japan trade changes after that, almost no change. Less than 1 percentage point. Almost no change. Why has there been almost no change? The big change is the bilateral balance. US-Japan bilateral balance has a big change. But overall, no change. Why? Because we don't live in a two-country world. Japanese goods are more expensive. The US just buys more expensive. So overall, the deficit remains the same. Why is the Japanese balance stays the same? Japanese capital flow to Southeast Asia, industrialize Southeast Asia, and service the US market in Southeast Asia. So the overall is no big changes. So if the renminbi will appreciate, FDI that goes to China will now be using elsewhere, and then selling it to the United States. So the US are trying every other method, but the right one, which is to make the big changes. Well, on the Chinese side, the trigger certainly exists, because I think China has to make some very fundamental changes in order to stop relying on the export growth to drive economic growth. Largely because there is this fallacy of competition. Look at Taiwan, Korea, and Southeast Asia. They all grew through export to the rich countries. The trouble is China is too big. The China export can saturate all its markets and creates huge problem. So it has to be domestic driven growth. Well, I think the great problem for China is what I call the middle income trap, and this is, I've got to stop and finish my book, but let me quickly go on. I think that, so China is going to come under greater stress from the United States. on every front. How good is China in managing threats from the US? The record is got them off. Basically, the Chinese are like teenagers, clumsy and sensitive. They're not responding to the American demands the right way, and they are very sensitive, which means they can be easily unreasonable. And that is difficult. As you could see in the Copenhagen summit, the world blamed China for the failure of the Copenhagen summit. Why? Because Wen Jiabao did not show up at the last head of state in Danish hotel room. He sent some low-level flunky over there. And the result is everyone blamed China. If Wen Jiabao were any cleverer, he should have stood up and said, let me sign 10 times. Why? If he had signed, Obama would say no. Because US law forbids Obama from agreeing to anything without prior clearance of US Congress. So if because China said no first, Obama didn't say no, so China got the blame. Basically, it goes on to show you, when I say China is a teenager, so implications for Australia certainly have to do to dampen the rivalry between the two of them, and this is where regional conflict resolution mechanisms are very important. Australia can do a lot to be the honest broker and to set up mechanisms and dialogues to bring the teenager closer to maturity. And the other implication for Australia is about the unconventional economic policy that is followed not only in the United States but in Western Europe and Japan. Basically, the old-fashioned word for unconventional monetary policy, where they print each of them print money like mad, that's the old-fashioned word is competitive devaluation. They're all forcing the currency. If Australia faces difficulty, if Australia would keep its exchange rate unchanged, it would be allowing its monetary base to expand and hence allow a bubble to incubate. You can see the US bubble period. This is in the bubble period, and look at how it has gone in the last year. So what caused the US economy to get in trouble? The collapse of the housing sector. So what have we been doing? Boosting up the mortgage sector with easy mortgage policy. So we're trying to return to the bubble path, and that is not going to solve anything. So far as Australia is concerned, it would have to recognize that it would have to play the role of possibly explaining to the Americans